Morning Kick Around's hot topic here for Monday, April 7th. I'm Robert, he's Jason, and we are joined by special guest Daniel Sperry, who's having an incredible week, both personally and professionally, here to talk about Sporting Kansas City, letting go their legendary coach Peter Vermes, and then winning in their very first game without him. From the KC Star soccer writer, Daniel Sperry, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kick Around.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a great little reunion. I used to do plenty of podcasts with Robert back in the day. Jenny back there pushing the buttons for us too today. So it's a nice little last word on soccer reunion here for a second, like Matt Pollard or something to pop in at some point.
That's awesome. I appreciate you coming on, Daniel. I guess I got to ask you. I mean, we'll dive right into the end of an era, the beginning of a new one in Kansas City. Although I guess we have to acknowledge that Kerry Savagnin is an interim manager on paper. But was it weird, Daniel? Was it weird to cover Sporting Kansas City without Peter Vermes?
Yeah, it felt odd. I think Friday. So I didn't go to the press conference on Tuesday. We had the baby Monday evening. I was juggling like the phone calls of a lot of people. Can you come on today? I'm like, nope, I'm sorry. We've got to go to the hospital right now. But yeah, so Friday I went out to the press conference, and it was odd to see Kerry in that role, I think, and not like in a bad way, but like Kerry's always been a very easygoing, relaxed interaction with us, and to have him be like the guy and this very professional guy in front of the mic, it instantly felt very different. And the game day felt a little bit different too. Just kind of a whole lot of question marks of like what it was going to look like. So yeah, it was different. It was odd, and I have never known a team here in Kansas City. I mean, in covering it and paying attention to MLS, a fan as a kid, and doing all of those fun things. I've known of a Kansas City time without Peter Vermes, but in terms of covering the sport here, I've never known anyone else other than Peter Vermes coaching this team, as have a lot of people really at this point in the industry. So it was a very odd game on Saturday, but it was a very good result in the end, and a very kind of a normal feeling, honestly, after a game for the first time in a while.
So with the departure of Peter Vermes, it must have been a little bit of a surprise because I've DM'd you and asked you, like, is there any changes coming? And you said, probably not. And then it happens. Is there a relief? Well, I guess what's the feeling between the press conferences and the game for the weekend?
Yeah, I think I don't know that there was a relief per se. For fans, I think there was like fans were fed up and frustrated going into this weekend. It's one of those things. I think they were asked to have patience and through this rebuild and this process. But there's also like so much not winning that fans can take in sports. And they got really restless. And I think as soon as the announcement was made on Monday, it chilled out a little bit. And I think people for the next, 24, 48 hours did their good job of actually, instead of just piling on and saying, hey, we're free, it was honoring the guy that put Kansas City soccer on the map in the way that he did. And then after that, it was very much like, all right, we've got to try and put these things behind us and focus on beating St. Louis. We're tired of St. Louis running their mouths about all their history and all this stuff. We are the ones with the history present wise. And I think the players even kind of took that on as well. I think there was a lot of emotion throughout the week that went into those moments this weekend that were, at the end, very, very high moments for players. We got to go into the locker room after the game, and we watched Mike Illig, the owner, hand carry the game ball for his first ever professional victory. And players were rowdy, loud, begging for a speech, interrupting him, goofing around. Jake Davis after the game explicitly said, I love Kerry. And I think there's a lot of guys that some of the guys who have been around for a long time and have only known Peter Vermes as their coach are also really behind Kerry because they've known Kerry for just as long. So I thought that was a very interesting twist, and so it was a little bit of a surprise in a way that they finally pulled the trigger. That's probably the biggest thing for me. Is I just, my question at some point, you know how this business is, results are results, and things weren't going their way, and to have the, preach patience while keep losing and stuff like that. It at some point there was a disconnect in that, and it felt like ownership had been around paying attention to things for the last couple of weeks, and they felt like they needed to make a change when they did. But I think from on my perspective, it was like he probably, in any other circumstance, he probably goes, maybe at the end of last season. But this is Peter's club. This is Peter's house. It's the house that he built. But it eventually became untenable in that way.
Daniel, the story of Sporting Kansas City the last couple years has been a team trying to keep up with a changing MLS without sort of diving fully in to the bigger spending ways that a lot of the competitors had engaged in. Now, we can talk about the context of Kansas City as a market and, what kind of ownership, how deep the pockets are, those kind of things. But Peter himself was saying, we're not spending enough money to keep up in Major League Soccer. That could be read as sour grapes from a guy who was trying to figure out how to win without the weapons he saw other teams have. Or you could argue it's a candid Peter Vermes, who was obviously in charge of both the roster building and the team on the field for so long. So, how much of this decision really was out of Peter's hands? And then does any of that change with Peter gone? I mean, I guess you could argue about Joveljic and the spend they made on him and a couple other guys, but where is this team in sort of that part of the changing MLS?
Yeah, and I think that's the type of pressure that comes onto the ownership in this situation now, right? Like they've made this call, so they've made it about the results and not so much their investment. And Peter has now, before the season, mid-season last year was talking about the type of budget that they were going to have and all of this stuff, and it was a kind of stuff that we could see per se that this team didn't spend a whole lot, and at times they for sure outpunched their weight there. And I think that's what I'm more interested to see how the ownership continues this without Vermes. They did make their investments this offseason in bringing in Garcia and Joveljic, and last game they were finally the DPs that you expected them to be, and I think there was, but I can understand it, right? Like Sporting never replaced Gadi Kinda going from 2023 to 2024. As much as Alan Polito's return to health was big for the team, and he scored all those goals in 2023 when they made that late run through the season, really, they didn't start actually picking up results until Gadi Kinda could go more than 45, 60 minutes. They had a true creative attacking player that could pull the strings. And so they never replaced him. And they, for some reasons, financial reasons, that ownership wouldn't spend what was required to spend at that time. Vermes has told a story of back in 2018 when they're top of the Western Conference. They had an opportunity to get a big time striker to come in and actually maybe push them over the edge to win an MLS Cup. And the response was, well, we're in first place. Why would we need to do that? In MLS now, you add like that, and you have to do that. So, those are things that were supposed to be rectified with the bringing in Mike Burns and this promise of this budget that happened over the summer last year, kind of last June. And so like those things should have, quote unquote, no longer been a problem. I'm interested more in, the general roster build. The roster is still not great. And like the center, like the midfield and the defense, if they found ways to somehow get off of Alan Polito's really bad extension, which, to some things I've heard was not entirely Peter Vermes' choice either in that. So there's a whole lot that goes into those things that, like, man, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because if you're a CSO that's coming in to replace Peter Vermes at the top of the pyramid, and then that's eventually going to get a coach, you're probably not going to go to a situation where you don't trust that you're going to have the finances to put out the winning team. Otherwise, you're looking for a job in 3 to 5 years, maybe sooner. again. So that's the thing that this ownership group and this ownership dynamic will have to continue to figure out. And I think the ownership dynamic is the one that's kind of is very fluid at the moment. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it continues to play out. Mike, clearly wore it and was up there in the press conference. And he'll probably continue to be the face in doing that. But I think there has been a shift in the ownership to realize that they need to spend more to keep up. I'm just curious to see what does that mean, because if you start spending at what teams were spending in 2021, 2022, compared to what teams are spending, like look at Austin, the amount of money that they put in now has to work on the field, right? But like the amount of money that Austin put into their team over the offseason was a lot for three big signings compared to what Sporting put in. So I just think like those are the things that are they going to be able to keep up at that level? What level do they choose to keep up in terms of spending? But I do anticipate seeing them spend more just because they did so this offseason, and I think they know that they can't rest on their laurels anymore.
Through the conversations of Vermes' departure and then obviously the interim and all situation, do you think there's any likelihood that Vermes will be in and around the club at all in the future, or is he kind of be absent moving forward?
I would be shocked if Peter Vermes doesn't end up like coaching another team at some point. Like I don't think he wants to quit coaching. So I'd expect him. I'm sure there's more openings that'll come up, and I'm sure people will consider bringing in Peter Vermes in their spot, and especially. But
well, let me ask you, Daniel. I hate to interrupt, but
no, you're
talking about him coaching, and that makes sense to me, having talked to him. That always seemed to be where his passion was. I mean, he hired himself to be the coach, basically. Let's not forget that. But obviously, he has also been the chief soccer officer, whatever label Sporting Kansas City uses. Could you imagine him doing only that job somewhere, or do you think he has to coach?
I mean, I could see it, but I don't know. It would have to be a really good opportunity, I think, at the moment. I don't like. I mean this with all due respect to like the Crafts in New England, but like I don't think New England's a place where he's like, yeah, I'll go in there and only be CSO if that kind of a thing happens. You know what I'm saying? Like, at one point he was asked to go to the Galaxy and turn down the Galaxy. This is early on in his career. If you kind of have ever sat down with him and heard his story there, so I think there's some there. I would more so expect him to coach. I just think that that's kind of where his passion lies, and he was really excited this offseason about not having to worry about the player signings and all that kind of stuff and leaving it to Mike Burns, and his focus was on coaching the team. And it's just kind of I'm sure it's disappointing that the things worked out the way that they did for him, but I could see Vermes maybe one day coming back in terms of like I would be shocked if he's not honored in some way, shape, or form at Children's Mercy Park beyond just the name on the wall that they do for the sporting legends. Like at some point, that is the house that Peter built, and there is a due honoring of kind of his legacy here in Kansas City. So whether it be in some way, shape, or form with the organization, I don't know that will probably happen in terms of a role with the team, but I'll also never say never. So you never know.
Do you think that this weekend's win, obviously it's been a long time since the team won. They got the win against St. Louis, obviously without him. Do you think that uptick in form was just pure emotion and a performance based on the moment? Or do you think, if you were to have a feeling, do you think that maybe some success, some results are to continue?
Yeah, I think they continued on some of the things that they did actually, like in Vermes' last game, the first 30 minutes against Dallas, I thought they were really, really good. They were lively. They were aggressive at going to goal. They got the goal, and then they kind of self-capitulated defensively as they have for the last year and a half. The first half against St. Louis was very much the same, a whole lot of action, but not a lot of like true concrete action inside the box. In the second half, that completely changed. They were able to get their playmakers on the ball a little bit of a midfield shift when Kyrie Shelton had to come out, and that kind of shifted the way those things were. Do I think it's sustainable? I think there was so much emotion going into the week. I'm curious to see how that goes now that they've kind of rode this high, and then you've got a Sunday afternoon game against Portland this week. Let's see how that emotion kind of carries through. But I do think there are quality pieces on this team, and they should be able to be better than losing, winning one of their first 6-7 games, one in every 7. That would not be a great year for Sporting, right? I think they're a little bit better than that per se, but there were some tactical things that Carey did that I thought were a nice departure from some of the things that we just kept on seeing Sporting do and continue to not work, but that's what they did. So they were going to continue to do it. Carey made a few tweaks here and there, and I made some tweaks in game that some of it due to necessity to get Kyrie Shelton off, some of it to help change the midfield a little bit and flip the triangle in the midfield. And it paid off in a big way in the second half. So I think I'll be curious to see what more Carey does to tinker, because Carey was very adamant in his press conference, his introductory press conference, that Sporting is going to be different and they're going to evolve. And I think he has some things. His quote was, "I have some things inside me that I'd like to try and do and explore in this role and this opportunity." And so we might be doing some things a little different. And they did a few things different, and it really worked.
Well, a new era upon you over there in Kansas City. Thank you so much for kind of elaborating and giving us a little bit of an in-the-room perspective of how this weekend went. Let the viewers know where to catch your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever the heck you want to call it, at SperryDaniel94, and then the Blue Sky as well, at Sperry Daniel or Daniel Sperry, somewhere up there. It's the same it should be the same profile picture. You should be able to find me on those. I'm terrible. I am working to be better at Blue Sky, so I'm not the greatest there, but you can find most of the stuff there, and of course any soccer related stuff in Kansas City at kansascity.com.
Thank you so much for sharing with us and sparing some time for us, Daniel. And congratulations on the baby, and all the best with that moving forward. Viewers, yes, thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so right now. We are growing this thing. Join the MK Ultras and help this show continue to grow. Thank you to user Simon. He subscribed during the show here today. So be like user Simon and subscribe to Morning Kickaround on youtube.com. You can also write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Follow along on social media at mkickaround, X, Instagram, Twitter. You can support financially on coffee.com/morningkickaround, or find the podcast on your favorite audio platform by searching Morning Kickaround.